Entitled neighbor wants her kids in my garden. So glad to have found this subreddit, because I have a legit crazy neighbor with boundary issues. I, 29 female, don't have any kids but have my younger sister, 16, living with me for around 10 years, and we have a trampoline still in our back garden from when she was younger. The neighbor to the left of me has 4 kids and moved in a year ago. 2 weeks ago, Glasgow started getting really good weather, so the kids have been out playing constantly, not an issue. They asked if I could let the kids use the trampoline one day, so I was like sure, but only for a bit because I have friends coming over for some drinks. At 7 p.m., I asked them to go home because my 5 friends have shown up and we're going to be drinking. Cue the crying, they leave the garden upset, but hey, that's not my issue. They've been on it for 3 hours at this point. Their mom pops her head out of her bedroom window and asks if they can stay in the garden longer. No, I'm not your babysitter. She's annoyed but drops it. Last week, I came home from some shopping, and to my surprise, I found all 4 of the kids in the garden, plus their younger cousin. Ask them to leave. Tell them they can't just come into my garden without me there, and they didn't even ask. They refused to leave, so I shout up at their mum and tell her to get them out of the garden. She says, let them play for a bit, you don't even use it. Okay, but still not your garden. Eventually we get into an argument, and they leave. She's pissed off and shouting, saying I'm being a Karen, and I should let them in. I tell her not to ask again, because the answer will be no. This happened again the day after, all 4 kids plus their cousin, waiting till I move the car from the drive, and heading straight into the garden. So I woke up this morning. I've since put a lock on the trampoline, just a small one on the mesh safety enclosure to stop them opening it up, because I'm petty as fuck. Plus, it's Saturday, I'm not working today, my day off, and I want a long lie-in. But no, the neighbor decides that at 9 a.m. this morning, her kids are being fired straight out of that house, with breakfast bars and a bottle of water, and they head straight into the garden. So I can hear them from my window. I look out and tell them to leave. By the time I get downstairs, Mum has descended from her house and is trying to climb the fence between our gardens, shouting about how I used to let them use it. And she's going to call the police for hitting her kids. Great, you do that. I'll be sure to show them the Ring camera footage, which coincidentally also has footage of your husband picking the lock open, so your brats can use the trampoline. So long story short, entitled mother sends her kids into my garden repeatedly, even after being told not to. Calls police on me for harassment and hitting her kids, and ends up getting her own husband arrested for theft and housebreaking and criminal damage. Suck it, bitch. Edit. Some people have asked if I could sell my neighbor the trampoline. She has a V-shaped garden and the smallest one on the street. The trampoline is 12 feet and wouldn't fit. Also gave her a bunch of my sister's old stuff when she first moved in, but have barely interacted with her since then. Edit 2. Decided that it's not worth the hassle. 10 minutes ago, 9:50 p.m. here in the UK, I took a knife and slashed the part you jump on. Brother is coming on Tuesday to help me dismantle it, and we will take it to the local recycling center. How my entitled aunt and cousin ruined my 10th birthday. My aunt dad's sister has always been the textbook entitled bitch. When I was a kid, she never missed an opportunity to make me feel like garbage. From thinly veiled insults to outright verbal and emotional abuse, she threw what she could at me in an attempt to break me. Of course, the disgust she felt for me and the faults she found in my dad's parenting never stopped her from mooching stuff off of him or asking him for favors without ever giving anything in return. She and her husband considered their son to be a gift from the heavens, and he too grew up to be a narcissistic bully who loved to torment me, even though I was 7 years younger than him. My mom passed when I was 1 year old, and both my grandmother and aunt had been abusive to her as well. But that's another tale for another time. This is about the time she, along with her son, ruined my 10th birthday. This incident resulted in me being put off birthdays and deciding to never celebrate them again. I just couldn't see them as a cause for celebration. My entire extended family, which included the said aunt, uncle, and cousin, along with some other relatives, were at our home, and my dad and stepmom had gone out to run some errands. My cousin had invited some of his friends over, even though my dad and stepmom didn't know them. My dad allowed them to come after my aunt whined incessantly about how her son would be bored if his friends were not there. I remember sitting in my room and playing with my dog. I knew my cousin would be down there, and I usually did what I could to avoid him. At that time, I suffered from a pretty bad stutter, and when I was upset or angry, it only got worse. This is something my cousin loved to make fun of, and of course my birthday would be no different. He demanded that I come downstairs to talk to his friends. When I refused, his mother told me to stop being rude and do as I was told. I was a powerless kid, so I really had no other choice. I went down to the living room, and my cousin introduced me to his buddies in his usual condescending way, as the birthday girl. He handed me a novel and told me to read out loud. I tried to read properly but failed. I was surrounded by judgmental stares, and it made me nervous. I stuttered, which is exactly what my cousin was hoping for. He and his friends began to snicker. I got angry and stopped reading. Cousin called me a freak, and his friends looked at me as though I was on display at a zoo exhibit. I wanted to prove them wrong, that I wasn't a freak, that I could read. I tried reading again, this time on account of my being angry. The stutter was much worse. My cousin decided to mock my stutter, and all but one of his friends roared with laughter. One who didn't actually notice my tears, and told the other to knock it off. He asked if I was okay. My cousin told him not to bother, it's just a joke, and that I was just an oversensitive baby. My rage was boiling over, and I threw the book at my cousin's face and stomped out. My aunt had seen what had happened, and decided to pull me by my hair and drag me back to the living room. She told me to apologize to my cousin. I refused. She told me I needed to be taught a lesson for being a brat. I tried to tell her what had happened. She chuckled and said, "So what? He's your cousin, and he's older than you. You need to respect him. Now apologize." I refused again, this time with a no. "I hate you. I hate all of you," all the while crying and shaking with anger. This didn't sit well with my aunt, and she slapped me before asking me why I didn't just die in the womb. She told me I was a troublemaker, just like my mother had been. She knew the day I was born that there was something wrong with me, that an evil bee like my mother couldn't possibly produce a normal kid. This was it. I balled up my fist and connected it to my aunt's face. I punched that bitch so hard I busted her lip. By now, all the other relatives had heard the commotion and had gathered in the living room. The moment my fist connected with my aunt was when my dad and stepmom walked in through the front door. The aunt started fake crying. She berated my father for not raising me right, and went on and on about how I was a violent, ill-mannered brat, etc. The other relatives also expressed their disappointment in me. My dad asked me what the hell I thought I was doing. I tried to tell him what my cousin had done and what my aunt had said about my mother. Unfortunately, my stutter reared its ugly head again, and all that came out of my mouth was gibberish. My tears were flowing again. In the meantime, my cousin had decided to take all his friends and bail. I was punished for my beastly conduct. My birthday celebration was canceled. My dad called my friends and asked them not to come over. I didn't cut any cake. The presents I was to receive from my parents were stocked away. I was banished to my room and stayed there for the rest of the day. I ate lunch and dinner alone. The next morning, no one spoke to me. I was given my breakfast platter, which I ate in my room. That afternoon, my cousin's friend, the one who had told them to stop bullying me, came over. He told my dad what my cousin had done and what my aunt had said. My dad sat me down and apologized to me, but added that it was still wrong of me to punch my aunt. I just sat there silently. I was emotionally numb. My dad kept telling me he loved me and that he was sorry. I just coldly stared at him. My stepmother suggested a belated birthday celebration. I refused. I told them I didn't want a birthday party and that I wouldn't celebrate my birthday ever again. I kept my word. Every year since that day, my parents would ask me what I wanted for my birthday, and I always replied, nothing at all. I would ask them not to get any cakes and not to invite any guests. The day I was born now means nothing to me. Even now, after all these years, I don't celebrate my birthday. Instead, I celebrate the day I landed the job that enabled me to move away from my family and start a new life. I consider it the day of my rebirth. It was the day I was able to leave all the pain and anger behind and could plan for a life that I would live on my own terms. My aunt and uncle's shitty parenting ended up costing them dearly. If you want to know what became of them, do let me know in the comments. It's pretty satisfying. Thank you for reading. Update: this is the story of the downfall of my aunt and uncle. My aunt has always doted on her son. I'm Indian, and in my country, son preference is a pervasive social disease. Most people, regardless of social status, religion, etc., place great value on their sons, and daughters are seen as a burden on the family. My aunt was no exception. Ever since she was a kid, she had had this messed up, one-sided competition with my dad. I, a woman, am my dad's only child. This gave her an opportunity to constantly make passive-aggressive remarks that my dad was so unfortunate to have a daughter, his line would end with him, etc. She and her husband spoiled their son to the point that he became a narcissistic bully. He would often mock my stutter, cheat on his girlfriends, and make unreasonable demands of his parents. But did they ever try to discipline him or say no to him? Of course not. Their prince could do no wrong. If he made fun of my stutter, I was a piece of trash who deserved it. If he cheated on his girlfriend, she must have neglected him. If he made sexist remarks about his female boss, well, he's a man. You get the picture. Years went by, and he just kept getting worse. When he was living with them, he at least pretended to respect them. But when he landed a very high-paying job and was able to move out, it was as if he forgot they even existed. He and his wife hardly ever spoke to them. By now, my uncle had retired. My aunt had never worked. They had very little money left, as they had spent it all on their son. They had paid for his education, his vacations, and his wedding. Now they barely had enough to put food on the table. My dad would help them as much as he could. In 2011, my cousin's wife became pregnant, and during her third trimester, my cousin asked his parents to move in with him and his wife. We all knew it was because they wanted free caretakers for the baby, but my aunt just couldn't shut up about how wonderful her son was for wanting to take care of his parents. By now, I was well established in my field and was looking forward to a successful career. She taunted my father one last time, saying my education and career would be of no use as I was just a daughter and could never take care of him the way her son would take care of her. My dad just smiled and wished her well. She and her husband moved to my cousins, who lived in another city. My dad would often receive calls and texts from her bragging about what a great life they had. She sounded a bit too chipper. My dad began to suspect that all wasn't right. About 6 months after they had left, my dad said he was going to visit them as he was getting worried about his sister. He asked me and my stepmother to accompany him. We reluctantly agreed. We arrive at their place, and it is truly stunning. A luxurious home in a posh locality. This was no surprise as my cousin is very successful. What shocked us was the way he was treating his parents. They were practically servants in his house. My aunt tended to the baby, cooked, and cleaned. My uncle tended to the gardens, took care of the cars, and went grocery shopping, etc. My cousin could easily afford maids, drivers, etc. But why would he when his parents were now his free slaves? What was even worse was the way he treated them. My cousin-in-law would often yell at my aunt and would just order her around. My uncle had this vacant and defeated look in his eyes. I had never liked him, but couldn't help but feel a tinge of pity. My dad took my aunt aside and told her she didn't have to live like this, that he could make arrangements for her and her husband. My aunt put on a fake smile and said, "Nonsense, we couldn't be happier." Any time my cousin or his wife said something cruel to her or told her to shut up when she tried to make conversation, my aunt would put on a smile and act as though it was just the sweetest thing anyone had ever said to her. It would have been funny had it not been so pitiful. Memories of all the horrible things she had said and done to me and my dad were still fresh in my mind, and the schadenfreude was real. My aunt's fake, rueful smiles and the way she tried to cover up how her son was really treating her is the cringiest thing I have ever seen. My aunt and uncle often stressed the importance of having a male heir. They claimed that their son would be their provider, while I, a daughter, would be a burden till the day I was married off. Surprise! Surprise! The exact opposite has happened. While they were basically slaves in their son's house, I'm unmarried, have a loving partner, wonderful pets and friends, and a great career. My dad has his own restaurant and seems very happy with his work. Entitled parents often assume that their kid can be an asshole to everyone else, but he would never do that to them. Boy, are they in for a shock. Edit. My cousin hasn't completely escaped karma either. A few months ago, he got fired from his job, and his boss at his new place of employment is his ex-girlfriend, whom he cheated on and dumped. All because he didn't like the fact that she was more successful than him. She's a wonderful person and won't misuse her power. But I'm sure working under his ex is eating my cousin alive. An entitled mother rips open the doors on my ambulance, and it does not end well for her. So this just happened last night, and I still can't believe someone would do this. I'm a 30-year-old male and a paramedic. I've been in EMS for the past 8 years, and I absolutely love my job. Last night, we were dispatched to a 75-year-old female who fell at home. The patient stated that she tripped over her carpet and hit her head when she fell. We arrived on the scene and noticed that the home was a duplex with our patient's door on the right and her neighbor's door on the left. We made our way into the home and found her lying on the floor. The woman was awake and breathing. We started asking her the standard questions. Are you okay? Does anything hurt? Do you remember the fall? Etc. She stated that she has a pounding headache and that she remembers walking to bed and then waking up on the floor. In my field, that's a pretty big red flag. We noticed that she's got a pretty good lump on the side of her head and a big bruise starting to form already. Noticing the bruise, I asked her if she was on any blood thinners. She said that she was on blood thinners for a previous stroke she had a few years ago. We urged her to let us take her to the hospital because there was a possibility that the fall could have caused a bleed in her brain and she should go to the hospital to get some scans done. She agrees and we begin to package her up. We applied a collar around her neck in case of any C-spine, neck injuries. She denied any neck or back pain, so we lifted her up and placed her on our stair chair. A stair chair is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chair with tracks that we use to carry patients up and down stairs. As we were getting her out of the house, her neighbor whipped the door open and started yelling about how she couldn't sleep with all the lights and noises outside. The sound of the stair chair apparently woke her up, and she was not happy about that. My lieutenant walked over to her and apologized and said that we were dealing with a medical emergency and that we would be leaving soon enough. The Karen neighbor then noticed that our patient was her neighbor, and that's when she started yelling about something totally different. The entitled neighbor started yelling, "You can't take her to the hospital. I have errands to run tomorrow, and she needs to watch my kids." My lieutenant again reiterated that we were here for a medical emergency and that her health is more important than her errands. The entitled neighbor let out a loud huff and then slammed the door in his face. We thought that was the end of it. We were wrong. After a few minutes in the back of the ambulance, we told our lieutenant that he could take the engine crew back to the station and that we were going to be heading out in a few minutes. After we checked her vitals, got in 4 going, and started giving her 4 fluids, my partner got out of the back and went up to the driver's seat. About 5 seconds later, the back doors of my ambulance fly open. And who do I see? The entitled neighbor, of course. Apparently, she needed a few minutes to get dressed before coming outside. I yell at her, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She yells back, "I told you that she can't go to the hospital because she has to watch my kids tomorrow." She then starts trying to pull the cot out of the ambulance with our patient on it. Luckily, she didn't know how to unlatch the cot and couldn't get her out. Our patient says, "I can't watch your kids tomorrow because I fell and I might be having a stroke." The entitled neighbor yells back at her and says, "You're fine. You don't need to go to the hospital because you're not having a stroke." My partner then hears the commotion and goes to the back of the ambulance. He pulls her off the cot and I slam and lock the doors. You could tell that the entitled neighbor was about to become combative. It's important to know that either the police department or the sheriff's department responds to our calls too when it's at night. Because of where we were, it took a few minutes for the sheriff's department to show up on the scene, but he got there just in time. I couldn't hear much through the door, but I saw the officer get out of his cruiser with his taser drawn. My partner runs back up to the driver's seat and starts heading to the hospital. The last thing I saw through the back windows was the entitled neighbor stomping towards the officer and then her hitting the ground after being tossed. Super satisfying to watch. I was talking with my patient and asked what that was all about, and she said that the entitled neighbor will just drop her 3 young kids off at her house and leave for several hours at a time with no notice. My patient had no idea that she was supposed to watch the kids at all because, again, the entitled neighbor never even gives her a heads up about these things. Like I said in the beginning, this happened last night, so I don't have any updates, but I'll post an update when I learn more. Small update. My contact at the hospital said that the patient does not have a bleed. She does, however, have a really nasty-looking bruise on her face from the blood thinners. It's incredibly common. She will most likely be going home soon. There is no update on the neighbor. I probably will not hear anything back until my next shift day. Update. Hey everyone, sorry for the late update. Unfortunately, it's not as exciting as some of you would hope for. So, I got in touch with the officer on that call, and he said that the woman was not formally charged with anything. The patient is back home now, and resting comfortably. Like I said before, the hospital found no signs of a bleed, and she was discharged the next day. She was advised to file for an order of protection from the neighbor, but I don't believe I will ever be privy to that information unless something happens again. I read a majority of the comments, and most people are saying to contact the Elder Abuse and DCFS. The only problem with filing those reports is having concrete proof. We never actually saw any children, so we can't really say that they are abused or neglected at all. We can say that we have a suspicion, but for all we know, they could be living their best lives at home with the entitled parent. If the entitled parent had left and abandoned her kids, then that's another story. Calling DCFS without any signs of child abuse and just working off hearsay can just cause more problems if the accusations are unfounded. The same can pretty much be applied to elder abuse. We have no actual proof of elder abuse occurring. The entitled neighbor was not involved in the actual fall, and there was no suspicion of any kind of financial, physical, emotional, or social abuse. The way our patient talked about the kids getting dumped on her was in more of an inconsiderate way and not in an abusive way. Long story short, the entitled neighbor was just kind of an asshole. I am, however, hoping that the patient will press charges for assault, but I don't know if she will. Our friend's entitled sister tried to force her way into our trip to Egypt. This story happened quite a few years ago with me and my friends, but after reading quite a few stories on this subreddit, I feel now is a good time as any to share this post. On November 2019, me and a couple of my friends, who I will call Haley, Rose, and Rachel, were given an opportunity to travel to the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. Note that we are archaeology graduates. While our families and friends were excited and proud of us for being able to go on this trip, Rachel's family did not feel the same way. Rachel's younger sister, who I'll call Lisa, was the golden child of her family. Anything she wanted, her parents gave to her, while Rachel had to take out a student loan to pay for college. Lisa's parents paid for her tuition, only for Lisa to drop out 2 years in. Instead, Lisa chose to try and build a career being a model and influencer on Instagram. When Rachel mentioned that she was going to Egypt with us, that our plane tickets and accommodation had already been taken care of for archaeological fieldwork, Lisa got jealous as she felt that a trip and taking photos of herself in Egypt for Instagram would help launch her modeling career. That said, their parents demanded that Rachel give her tickets to Lisa, as they felt Lisa was more deserving of it, to which Rachel obviously said no. It was already paid for by the foundation, specifically for her and our group, who were trained to do this kind of work, etc. According to Rachel, she's had back and forth arguments with her family leading up to the trip, so she eventually just left home and moved in with her boyfriend's, now husband, apartment. I held on to our plane tickets, as we were all to meet up at my dad's place in the morning before we headed off to the airport. At the time, I still lived with my dad. That said, as me, Rachel, Haley, and Rose were at my place, just hanging out and getting ready, the car of Lisa and their mom pulled up as they came knocking on my door. Apparently, they were demanding one more time that Rachel give her ticket to Lisa. Lisa even had a couple of bags with her as well. Before I continue, I just want to give you a better understanding of Lisa and Rachel's family, and why they may behave or think this way. Rachel is the only one in her family who has actually finished college. Rachel pretty much took care of herself for much of her childhood, as her parents were too fixated on Lisa. Their parents moved to Los Angeles from Florida to try and become actors, but failed. Moved up here for some reason, and now their dad works as a truck driver, and their mom, I think, works at a grocery store. Rachel's family treated formal education and academia in general as a joke, and didn't really support the idea of anyone going to college until Lisa decided she wanted to try going to college herself, as previously mentioned. Haley then interjected, interrupting them and pointing out again that this was not a vacation, this was an archaeological trip, and we were going there to do actual work. Haley went on to point out that it's Rachel's name on the plane ticket and on our accommodation in Luxor, so she asked Lisa and her mom questions like, how do you think Lisa is going to get on the plane? Who will Lisa be traveling with in Egypt? And where will Lisa be staying there? Apparently Lisa, despite not being friends with us at all, and her mom expected the rest of us, me, Haley, and Rose, to just somehow convince customs to let her through and get on the flight, as well as expecting us to look after and accompany Lisa. I should also note that apart from Rachel, nobody in her family ever traveled on a plane before. Lisa and their mom have never been overseas, and the only international traveling their dad ever did was driving trucks to and from Mexico. That said, I'm guessing this is why they don't seem to know how plane tickets or customs work, but that's just my assumption. I then pointed out to Lisa that if she really wants to go to Egypt, She could just buy her own tickets to Egypt and book her own accommodation. However, Lisa said she didn't want to do any of that, and she wanted Rachel's place in our trip, as she wanted all the expenses to be paid for and for us to accompany her, as she didn't want to travel by herself. Lisa and her mom eventually left after seeing that trying to argue and force her way into our trip was not getting them anywhere, with the four of us, me, Haley, Rachel, and Rose, flying off to Egypt. After the dig at the Valley of the Kings, we did get to go and do touristy stuff, such as touring Cairo and seeing the pyramids of Giza. As for Lisa, while she still posts a lot on Instagram, she seems to have given up on a modeling and/or influencer career, as she's now just working in a warehouse. After the pandemic, she did get to go on vacation to Cancun though, but that's about it. Edit. I make it a point to print out paper copies of the tickets, as I prefer using paper rather than just showing them my phone, and needless to say, yes, we all had our passports and visas. Except Lisa, who had a passport, sure, but I'm certain didn't have a visa. Entitled customer goes nuts because we won't sell her my purse. So for the last dozen years or so, I've been carrying this gorgeous vintage designer bag I found online. I think I bought it in 2010. I love it, and I will carry it until it falls apart. I get a ton of compliments on it. And it also caused this one crazy story. I spent 3 years working in an Ivy League college town upscale clothing boutique that catered to wealthy college students and their parents and tourists. We didn't sell anything like this bag, but I suppose I can see where it would have fit in with the things we did sell. One afternoon I was getting ready to leave for my lunch break, and I had put this vintage bag on the counter while I was putting my coat on. An expensively dressed woman who had just walked up to the counter picked up my bag and asked my coworker, who was at the register, how much it was. I walked over and politely took it from her and said it was my personal bag and it wasn't for sale. She literally snatched it out of my hands and went off on both of us. The bag was sitting on the counter. It had to be for sale. It was obviously much too fancy and expensive a bag for a retail loser to own. And oh, didn't we just wish we were Ivy League students like her precious babies? Which was actually funny, because I didn't work there because I needed the money. I worked there as a favor to the owner, who was a friend of the family, basically as a fill-in for one of her full-time employees who had a chronic illness and called in sick a lot. It allowed her to keep the other worker, rather than letting her go for someone more reliable. This entitled woman probably really would have flipped if I had told her that my husband was a professor at our beloved Ivy League school, and I could easily afford that bag. Thank you very much. So yada yada yada, this woman just kept screaming at us. She wanted that bag so badly, she absolutely refused to believe it belonged to me. Started screaming about wanting to see the manager or the owner, and didn't believe my coworker when she informed the woman that she was the store manager. We finally told her that if she didn't give me back my bag and leave the store, we were going to call the police. She refused, so police were called. Police get there. Entitled woman gets even worse and doubles down on her particular form of insanity. She tells them that it's her bag and she'd brought it in with her and that we were trying to steal it from her. The cop took the bag away from her and opened it up and dumped all the contents on the counter. My cell phone, which of course I knew the passcode to, and she didn't. Prescription medication bottles that are in my name, my checkbook, and everything else I carry on a daily basis. How she had failed to recognize, just from the weight of the bag, that it had stuff in it, I don't know. You could see the fear creeping into her face as the cop came up with one item after another that proved the bag was mine. When he got to my wallet and pulled out what was clearly my license, the woman jerked away from the second cop, who had a hand on her arm, and pretty much ran out of the store. I kind of wish they had gone after her, but apparently they didn't think the situation warranted it, because they just asked us if we considered it worth pursuing her and pressing charges. Sadly, in that moment, we didn't want to be bothered. We just wanted it to be over, so we could go on with our day. I wish now that we had. She needed to be taught a lesson or be forced to get mental help. She wasn't the only crazy, entitled customer we ever got, but she was one of the most memorable. And that's where we'll leave it for now. I don't know what it is about entitled people that makes these stories so satisfying. Maybe it's the secondhand rage, maybe it's the karma, maybe both. Either way, again, Reddit never fails to deliver. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and drop a comment below. Tell me which story had you pissed off the most. And if you've ever dealt with someone this entitled, I definitely want to hear about it.